This is not a coincidence that you are hearing this right now. Some messages arrive exactly when the pressure is highest and the silence feels longest. What you are facing is not random, and what is coming is not delayed. Hidden battles, unseen resistance, and quiet opposition have reached their limit. The moment you thought nothing was changing is the moment everything was being arranged. Stay with this message, because what is about to unfold is about divine timing, sudden reversals, and a victory that does not need your defense. There are moments when time itself becomes an instrument in the hands of God. Not every hour carries the same weight, and not every day holds the same authority. Divine timing is not random, it is intentional, precise, and unstoppable. When the appointed time arrives, events that were frozen suddenly move, doors that resisted suddenly open, and resistance that looked permanent suddenly loses strength. You may have waited longer than you expected. You may have prayed prayers that seemed to echo back in silence, but silence never meant absence. It meant preparation. What looks like delay in the natural is alignment in the spiritual. When divine timing is activated, things do not happen gradually, they happen decisively. One moment nothing changes, and the next moment everything shifts. This is how God works. He allows time to mature the situation until nothing can stop what He has decided to release. There are seasons when God allows pressure to increase, not to destroy you, but to position you. Pressure exposes motives, filters relationships, and reveals who is truly with you and who is only around you. Divine timing ensures that when victory comes, it cannot be questioned, challenged, or reversed. If it came earlier, it would be attacked. If it came later, it would lose impact. But when it comes exactly on time, it silences every voice that doubted and every force that resisted. You were not forgotten. You were being positioned at the exact point where opposition would collapse under its own weight. Silence before sudden victory is one of the greatest tests of faith. There are moments when speaking too early can interrupt what God is building. Silence is not weakness, it is restraint under authority. While others argue, defend, and explain, silence allows God to speak on your behalf. When you remain silent, you deny your enemies information. You deny them access to your emotions, your strategy, and your next move. Silence confuses opposition because they expect reaction, not restraint. They expect fear, not faith. They expect you to break, not to wait. In silence, battles are fought that eyes cannot see. While you appear still, heaven is active. While you seem unmoved, systems are being rearranged. Silence forces your enemies to expose themselves. They talk more, reveal more, and overplay their hand while you remain covered. Many victories are lost because people speak too soon, react too fast, or move before God moves. Silence keeps you aligned with divine timing. It protects you from premature celebration and premature defeat. Sudden victory does not announce itself. It arrives without warning. That is why silence comes first. God allows the enemy to believe they are winning, to grow comfortable, confident, even careless. They assume your silence means surrender. They assume your stillness means defeat. They misinterpret patience as powerlessness, but silence is often the last stage before intervention. When God moves suddenly, there is no time for the enemy to regroup, explain, or escape. What took them years to build can collapse in moments. There is a strength that comes from knowing you do not need to speak for God to act. Silence teaches trust. It trains the heart to wait without control. It builds authority that cannot be learned in noise. When victory comes after silence, it is undeniable. No one can say you manipulated it, forced it, or argued your way into it. The silence becomes evidence that this was not human effort, but divine intervention. In that moment, those who spoke against you will have nothing left to say. and those who doubted will have no explanation for how it happened so quickly, so cleanly, and so completely. Many battles are not visible because they are never meant to be fought in the open. Hidden battles are the most dangerous because they operate quietly through whispers, assumptions, and unseen resistance. While you were moving forward, forces were working behind closed doors, shaping narratives, planting doubts, and attempting to block progress without ever confronting you directly. These battles are fought in conversations you were never invited into and decisions made without your knowledge. What you could not see, God could. What you could not access, God already entered. The enemy relies on secrecy because exposure would weaken them. They depend on shadows because light dismantles control. Hidden battles often feel confusing because the resistance does not match the situation. You sense opposition but cannot identify the source. You feel pressure without understanding the reason. This is how unseen conflict operates. It drains energy, creates uncertainty, and attempts to provoke reaction. But hidden battles have an expiration date. They cannot remain concealed forever. When God decides to act, what was hidden becomes visible, and what was whispered in secret is exposed openly. Public collapse follows private plotting. The very strategies formed in silence unravel in full view, leaving no doubt that a higher authority has intervened. Public collapse is never accidental. It is the result of divine exposure. When God brings something into the light, it cannot stand. Structures built on manipulation, jealousy, or pride lack the foundation to survive revelation. Those who opposed you secretly will find themselves unable to maintain the image they carefully constructed. Their influence weakens, their credibility fractures, their control slips away. What they used to intimidate now embarrasses them. What they used to dominate now reveals their weakness. The fall is not slow, it is sudden, because once truth is revealed, resistance loses all power at once. While hidden battles rage, God fights on your behalf in ways you cannot replicate or control. He does not need your defense to establish your innocence. He does not require your explanation to reveal truth. When God fights for you, the battlefield shifts to a realm where your enemies have no authority. He rearranges circumstances, exposes motives, and interrupts plans without warning. You may feel powerless in the natural, but powerlessness is an illusion when divine intervention is at work. God's involvement removes the burden of proving, justifying, or retaliating. When God fights for you, justice is not delayed, it is perfected. Human justice is limited by information, bias, and timing. Divine justice operates with complete knowledge and perfect precision. God sees the full picture, including intentions, histories, and consequences. He does not react emotionally, he acts decisively. His intervention does not merely stop the enemy, it resets the entire situation. What was meant to harm you becomes evidence of your protection. What was meant to limit you becomes the very reason you advance. There is a difference between fighting for yourself and allowing God to fight for you. Fighting for yourself keeps you tied to the conflict. Allowing God to fight releases you from the weight of the outcome. When God fights, you are preserved while the opposition is confronted. You are refined while the enemy is exposed. You are elevated while resistance collapses. This kind of victory does not require effort. It requires surrender. It requires trusting that God's methods are higher, His timing is accurate, and His power is sufficient. Those who tried to overpower you will discover that they were contending with something far greater than they anticipated. They assumed you were alone, vulnerable, and unsupported. They misjudged the source of your strength. When God fights for you, outcomes shift without explanation. Doors open that were sealed. Resistance dissolves without confrontation. The collapse is public, not to humiliate, but to demonstrate authority. It becomes clear that what happened was not the result of influence, strategy, or coincidence, but the unmistakable result of divine intervention moving on your behalf. Overnight reversals do not begin in the morning, they are prepared in the darkness. While you were resting, thinking nothing was changing, shifts were taking place beyond your awareness. What looked stable was being weakened. What appeared permanent was already under review. God does not always announce his work. Often he completes it before you ever see the result. An overnight reversal is not luck, nor is it coincidence. It is the release of accumulated obedience, patience, and endurance reaching its appointed moment. Years of restraint can produce one night of transformation. What resisted you for a long time can move suddenly because the resistance was never as strong as it appeared. Plans designed against you often rely on predictability. Your enemies studied your patterns, assumed your reactions, and anticipated your responses. They grew confident because everything seemed to follow the same course. But an overnight reversal disrupts every assumption. What they expected to control slips out of their hands. What they thought was settled is reopened. What they believed was finished begins again without their permission. Reversals expose the fragility of human control. Systems collapse when they are touched by divine authority because they were never built to withstand it. When a reversal happens overnight, it leaves no time for adjustment. There is no opportunity for damage control or manipulation. That is why it is so effective. God moves quickly when the moment is right. He bypasses the processes that humans depend on and acts with finality. The same speed that once worked against you now works in your favor. The same suddenness that caused loss now brings restoration. This is how balance is restored without negotiation or struggle. Enemies fall without warning because they are blinded by their own confidence. They mistake temporary success for permanent authority. They grow comfortable, assuming their position is secure, unaware that their downfall is already scheduled. When warning signs are ignored, collapse becomes inevitable. God does not always give advance notice to those who operate in opposition. When he removes protection, exposure follows instantly. What looked untouchable becomes vulnerable in a moment. Falling without warning does not mean falling without cause. It means the cause was unseen. The seeds of collapse were planted long before the fall occurred. Pride, injustice, manipulation, and arrogance weaken structures from the inside. While everything appears strong externally, cracks form internally. When pressure is applied, collapse is unavoidable. The fall is sudden because the damage was cumulative. What takes time to decay can still fall in an instant. When enemies fall without warning, it confirms that the battle was never in your hands. You did not orchestrate their downfall. You did not push, threaten, or retaliate. The collapse happens independently of your action, removing any accusation of interference. This is how God protects your integrity. The victory is clean because it was not forced. The outcome is undeniable because it cannot be traced back to your effort. There is a shock that comes with sudden collapse. Those watching struggle to understand how everything changed so fast. One moment there was resistance. The next moment there is silence. One moment there was opposition. The next moment there is absence. The speed of the fall silences explanations. It leaves only the reality of what has happened. Power shifts without announcement. Authority transfers without ceremony. Overnight reversals and sudden falls serve a greater purpose than personal relief. They reset alignment. They restore order. They remind every opposing force that control is temporary and authority belongs to God alone. What ends suddenly creates space for what begins next. The removal of resistance allows movement that was previously blocked. When the fall happens, it clears the way for progress that no longer needs permission or validation. You have learned that silence was never weakness, it was positioning. While you waited, divine timing was being activated. Hidden battles were being fought on levels you could not see, and plans formed in secrecy were already collapsing. God was fighting on your behalf, rearranging circumstances, exposing motives, and removing resistance without requiring your effort. Overnight reversals were prepared in the unseen, and the confidence of your enemies blinded them to their own downfall. What seemed stable was fragile, what seemed powerful was temporary, and what seemed delayed was perfectly timed. You did not need to explain yourself, defend your name, or force a result. The victory came clean, sudden, and undeniable, proving that this battle was never yours to fight.